So this one is about the so-called great taking. So this is an idea that's been popularised by this guy called David Webb. So this bloke produced a PDF book called The Great Taking, and he's been on quite a few podcasts. And the gist of the idea is that the World Economic Forum are going to steal all of your assets, including any cash that you might have. So, in this video, what I'm going to address is whether the great taking is on the money or not, or whether it's just overhyped fear porn. So let's take one example that he talks about. So people that theoretically own their own home, but who have a mortgage on that property. And basically what this guy says is that until you actually have paid off the mortgage in its entirety and the deeds to the house are actually in your name and in your hands, then basically the banks can seize your property. Now, for me, this shouldn't really be news to anybody. That if you buy a house and you take a mortgage on it, until you've paid off that mortgage, of course, the house belongs to the bank until you've paid the very last of those monthly payments over 25 or 30 or 35 years even these days. So what could happen? Well, basically you've got a scenario of an economic depression, people losing their jobs rather, and at the same time maybe you've got an increase in interest rates. So it's people's ability to pay their mortgages is greatly diminished. So the idea is that people will go, maybe you've done 20 years worth of mortgage repayments, or maybe even 24 years of mortgage repayments. In the 25th year, they can't pay for the house. The house is then repossessed by the bank, and you will own nothing and be happy. So is this true? Yeah, of course it's true. This shouldn't really be coming as a surprise to anybody. The other thing that this David Webb talks about is shares. So some people buy a share in a company, a share in the ownership of a company, and in return for that they get paid a dividend. Now the way that it works these days is that most people own shares electronically through maybe a share dealing brokerage, or maybe just through, I don't know, you might bank with HSBC and you might have their share dealing account. So when you buy shares, the deal here is that yes, theoretically you're the owner, but if you actually look at the small print of the contract, you're not really at all. It's HSBC that owns your shares, and you have a theoretical claim on them. So basically, this is again the great taking. What's likely to happen? Well, in an economic depression, an orchestrated depression, maybe HSBC has borrowed money from BlackRock, and basically HSBC is insolvent. Okay, so you own shares with an insolvent entity, so you're what's called a creditor. A creditor is somebody that owes you money. So HSBC would owe you your shares, but the problem for you is that in the small print, you're likely to be a low-ranking creditor. So when HSBC is what's left of its assets is sold off, then BlackRock will be further up the line of creditors than you. So those shares that you think you own, if HSBC goes bust, you might not get your shares. You probably won't get your shares. Instead, BlackRock, who's a more senior creditor than you, will take your shares. So again, should that be a surprise to anybody? Like, honestly, if it is a surprise, you've not really been concentrating. Unless you have the share certificates in your hand and the share certificates are in your name, you don't own it. You're just a creditor of a share dealing exchange or your bank. On these podcasts, this David Webb guy, he also talks about people who've got savings in a bank account. And again, he's this revelation shouldn't be a revelation, but it's presented as if it's a revelation, is that when you put your savings in a bank account, that's your choice, and you've chosen to hand over the ownership of your cash to the bank. So the bank theoretically owns your savings. And what are you? Well, you're just a creditor of the bank. You're somebody that is owed money by the bank. So if the bank goes bust, is there any guarantee that you'll get your cash back? No, not really. Oh, but then the normie will say, oh yes, well the government, it has £85,000 guarantee. So if a bank goes bust, then the government will pay you. Like honestly. So like, to those normies, do you really think that the government has got £85,000 multiplied by, I don't know, 30 million people who've got bank accounts in the UK or more, just there as a slush fund, just in case banks go bust? Has another question for the normies is that, has this guarantee, this bank deposit guarantee, has it ever been tested? No. So I put it to you that the government might not honour its pledge to pay out this 85,000 deposit guarantee scheme. So any money that you have in the bank, it's money really that shouldn't be too important to you, because it's highly likely that in a banking crisis you'll lose it. Or if you get the money back, the £85,000 will have just been freshly printed by the Bank of England. So, in that case, a loaf of bread might cost you 50 quid. And in actual fact, you've got some sterling back from the government, but it's worth nothing in terms of its purchasing power. So in effect, your money was Another one is pensions. So when you make pension contributions into a pension fund, do you own that pension? No, you don't. You're just a creditor of the pension company. When you reach retirement age, theoretically, the pension company is supposed to honour the contract that it's made with you and pay you a pension based on the value of their investments that they've made with your money. And those investments might just be bottles of £500 champagne that the people managing your pension portfolio invested in. Ha 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 ha, sucker. So yeah, the great taking. Will you have a pension? Probably not. These scumbags will basically steal it from you. Either the pension fund goes bust and basically, oh, whoopsie, a bit like the Maxwell pensioners. So this great taking thing shouldn't really be coming as a surprise to anybody. Basically what this is about in a nutshell is something that economists call counterparty risk. Now this guy David Webb, he's just another one of these like lawyer type people who've not really studied any economics at all. They might have made some shekels in the city, in rigged markets, but they don't really know about basic fundamental economic principles. And one of these principles is the idea of counterparty risk. So a counterparty is somebody that you've trusted to deal in matters in your behalf. So, for example, you might have some metals, like coins, yeah, the ones that actually had some intrinsic value. I'm not going to mention some words here that begin with G and S because it will just trigger the algorithm, and this video won't get any views at all. So I'm not going to do that. So, if you go and theoretically, if you own those coins of intrinsic value, then there's no counterparty risk, is there? That is, unless you've actually bank safety deposit box. And if you've done that, then again, what you'll find is that you've transferred ownership of your coins over to the bank that's running the safety deposits box scheme, and you're just, what are you? You're just a creditor of that organisation. So, you know, what happens if that organisation goes bust? Well, like, you lose your coins. So, on this channel, as you know, I'm a great believer in putting forward solutions. So, yeah, Klaus and the gang, they're after your cash, they're after your house, they're after your pensions, they're after your share portfolio. How can you stop them? Answer is, you invest in assets that lie outside the financial system, that don't have counterparties that could default on you, you know, that could renege on their contractual agreements with you. So let's give you some examples. So number one might be Bitcoin, but that would only be Bitcoin that would be off a conventional exchange, you know, because basically, again, if you own Bitcoin through an intermediary, you don't really own it. You're just a creditor. So if you're going to buy shares as an investment, a lot of people, they're told to sort of think that owning shares is kind of risky. It is if you're buying shares in companies that you don't know anything about, and you're like, you know, sell, buy, sell, buy, you know. But if you buy shares in very, very solid companies that sell a good product, and those companies have low levels of debt, and you just hold those shares for years and you reinvest the dividends, and it's not a bad tactic in my book. But do your own research into which companies that you purchase the shares in. But then the crucial thing is, when you do that, you need to have the physical share certificates in your name, in your possession. Otherwise, they don't really belong to you. So thinking about property, you know, this has obviously been a very, very fashionable investment, and I've talked about this before on this channel about the property porn, you know, location, homes under the hammer, and all of these other shows, which kind of encourage people to think all they had to do to get rich. Well, you don't need to bother with any of that work stuff. All you do is to go down to the bank or building society, borrow shed loads of money, and then go and buy property. So basically, you're not really buying the property at all. All you're doing is taking a leveraged gamble. You're using borrowed money to purchase an asset that you don't really own until you've paid off the mortgage. So what would I say about property? Well, if you're going to own it, make sure that you actually do own it fully. And that means paying off any mortgage that you've got, because until you do that, the house isn't yours. And as soon as you've paid off the mortgage, then what you got to do is act really quickly and batter down the door of the bank or the building society and demand that the deeds for the property are transferred into your name, and you go and buy a metal safety deposit box that you keep at home with the property deeds in it in your name. Then you're the rightful owner of it. You might consider owning other things outright. You know, for example, land here in Finland. You could buy some forest, and you know, that generates income in the form of timber that you can cut down and sell every year. Or, you know, it might be that you go and buy classic cars, or it might be you go and buy, I don't know, fine wine or whiskey or whatever. These things can't be printed, so they're an excellent store of value, a much better store of value than cash in the bank. Because as they print, as the central banks and governments, same difference, they print more and more money, what you'll find is that the price of these assets will rise in line with the amount of extra money printing that's being done. So it's a good hedge against inflation. You're going to preserve your wealth. On the other hand, if you put money in the bank, then the bank balance, you know, it will go up because of interest that you're being paid, but the bank balance won't go up nearly as fast as the money supply is going up, as the price level's going up. So it's, you know, it's another way that Klaus will have you. You know, you'll own nothing and be unhappy. The other benefit of owning things like property outright, land outright, classic cars, fine wine, etc., is that you don't have a counterparty risk. You're not your access to your assets, your ability to convert them into cash if you want to do that. It's not dependent on a third party, so you don't need to place your trust and in Giles, Sylvester, and Sebastian and co, who are basically going to stiff you. You basically are the sole owner of those assets. They're under your control. They're under your ownership. You can buy and sell them as you please. Not a problem. There is one downside to this, which is like in the 1930s, the American government passed a law whereby they tried to force Americans to sell, those coins again. At a price that the American government decided, which was a lousy, low rip-off price. But even in that situation, even if the government tries to just seize private property outright, they will actually find it quite difficult in the case of those coins, because they're easily concealed. Basically, how do they know that you have them? And they don't know how many you might have of them, etc. So you can live outside of their system, and I think that would be a good thing to bear in mind. I came across something today, I don't know if it was on Twitter or something like that, but it was basically referring to a particular religious group in Britain, and it was like saying, well, the way that they handle things maybe could act as a blueprint for us. So what they do is they live parallel lives according to their customs and laws in our society. So that could be a blueprint for us. So when they try to come at us with the CBDC, totalitarianism and all the rest of it, then we just basically do what this religious group in Britain is currently doing, which is basically like jog on. We'll just trade amongst ourselves and we'll form our own community that is actually separate from your society. So actually you won't control us. So yeah, that's all I want to say today. So the Great Taking, is it true? Yeah, this is what they're up to. I've made videos about this like a year ago or 2 years ago even. So it's not a surprise to me. The only surprise is that it's actually, this guy's gained a bit of traction with it. He's just recycling like, I don't know, 2-year-old news basically. It's nothing surprising about this. And is it possible to avoid the Great Taking? Yeah, it is, but you can't be a normie. You can't be a trusting normie, otherwise they'll like scalp you like a Red Indian. Whew, off. You will lose everything and you won't be very happy about it. So that's all I want to say today, so God bless.